Before the vows had cooled upon the parchment, the court had already decided her fate. Long before affection might have found its footing, judgment had entered the ballroom first, dressed in silk and civility, armed with whispers sharper than any blade. The chandeliers above trembled with candlelight, scattering gold across marble floors, while 100 conversations braided together into a single, watchful hush. It was the evening of the Duke of Ashcombe's marriage, yet no joy clung to the air. What lingered instead was curiosity, restrained delight, and the unspoken pleasure of witnessing a woman misstep beneath the weight of a title she had not been born to carry. She stood at his side as the music softened, her gloved hands folded with deliberate composure, her spine straight despite the invisible pressure bearing upon her shoulders. Miss Eliza Fairley no longer existed here. In her place stood the Duchess of Ashcombe, newly crowned by duty rather than desire, her worth already under appraisal by men and women who believed lineage to be the sole measure of virtue. Her gown was modest by courtly standards, chosen with intention rather than extravagance, its pale fabric catching the light without demanding it. She did not seek attention, yet attention found her all the same. The Duke, tall and immaculately composed, surveyed the room with practiced detachment. He was a man long accustomed to command. His presence alone enough to quiet disputes and inspire caution. His dark coat bore the subtle embroidery of rank, his posture unyielding, his expression unreadable. When he spoke, it was with clarity rather than warmth, his voice carrying effortlessly across the gathered nobility. "This marriage," he said, pausing just long enough for anticipation to sharpen, "means nothing beyond its purpose." The words landed with surgical precision. A ripple passed through the assembly, polite gasps carefully masked behind fans and goblets. He continued, unmoved. "It is an alliance, nothing more. Let no one mistake it for sentiment." Eliza did not flinch. That restraint, more than any protest, drew notice. Her gaze remained steady, fixed somewhere beyond the Duke's shoulder, as though dignity were a discipline she had mastered through long rehearsal. Only the faint tightening of her fingers betrayed the cost of such stillness. She had known this moment would come. The terms had been made plain long before the ceremony, spoken in quiet rooms and framed as necessity rather than cruelty. The crown required stability. His family required obedience. She had been the most suitable answer, not because she was powerful, but because she was unobtrusive. Around them, the court resumed its careful breathing. Ladies inclined their heads with brittle smiles. Gentlemen murmured assessments beneath courteous tones. A duchess by marriage alone, they thought. A solution, not a triumph. Servants watched from the periphery, their eyes more honest than those of their betters, sensing the imbalance before it was spoken aloud. Eliza felt each glance like a measured weight, yet she carried them without complaint. She had learned early that survival often depended upon silence. The Duke turned slightly, offering his arm with impeccable propriety. There was no tenderness in the gesture, yet neither was there disdain. His touch was light, formal, as though she were a guest rather than a wife. As they moved through the ballroom, conversation stalled and resumed behind them, dissecting every detail. Some noted her calm. Others mistook it for ambition disguised as meekness. Few considered the courage it required simply to stand. In the days that followed, the judgment did not abate. London society observed her as one might observe a painting whose value remained uncertain, waiting for flaw or brilliance to reveal itself. Eliza attended calls and dinners with measured grace, speaking when addressed, listening more than she spoke. She treated servants with courtesy that bordered on gratitude, earning their quiet loyalty. She studied the rhythms of the household, learning where she was permitted to intervene and where she must not. Her intelligence revealed itself subtly, in well-timed remarks and thoughtful silences, never challenging, never retreating. The Duke remained distant, absorbed in affairs of state and obligation. When they met, their exchanges were brief, correct, and restrained. Yet he noticed more than he allowed himself to acknowledge. He observed how she bore slights without retaliation, how she navigated rooms designed to unmake her. He recognized, perhaps reluctantly, that her presence did not diminish him. Still, ambition had been his companion for too long to loosen its grip so easily. The court, however, was less patient. Whispers grew bolder, their content sharpening as curiosity soured into suspicion. Questions arose, delicately phrased yet unmistakable, regarding her suitability, her past, her right to the title she wore. Eliza sensed the shift, the air thickening with anticipation of a fall. At a formal supper, beneath portraits of Ashcombe ancestors, a remark was made, cloaked in humor, suggesting that virtue was not inherited, only displayed. Laughter followed, restrained but unmistakable. Eliza met the insult with a serene inclination of her head. The Duke heard it clearly. He paused, his expression unreadable, then continued his conversation as though nothing had occurred. The silence that followed was heavier than any rebuke. As the evening drew to a close, Eliza understood that her trial had only begun, and somewhere beneath the chandeliers and whispers, the meaning of this marriage was quietly waiting to be tested. Morning arrived at Ashcombe House with disciplined quiet, as though the estate itself understood the necessity of restraint. Pale light slipped through tall windows and rested upon polished floors, illuminating portraits of dukes long dead yet still watchful. Eliza rose early, long before society demanded her presence, and dressed without assistance, preferring the steadiness of her own hands. The house had not yet decided whether she belonged within its walls, and she sensed that any misstep, however small, would be recorded and repeated. Still, she moved through the corridors with measured confidence, acknowledging servants by name, observing their work with interest rather than command. In the days following the ball, invitations arrived in careful abundance. Luncheons, musicales, afternoon calls, all extending courtesy while withholding warmth. Eliza accepted each with unfailing politeness, aware that refusal would be interpreted as arrogance and enthusiasm as presumption. She learned to read a room before she entered it, gauging where she might stand without imposing, where her voice would be tolerated, where silence would be safest. Beneath the civility, she felt the tension coiling, waiting for proof that the Duke's choice had been an error. The Duke of Ashcombe observed her from a distance. He pretended not to measure. He departed early for Parliament and returned late, his days consumed by alliances and debates that required clarity rather than compassion. Yet he noticed changes within his household. Staff moved with unusual calm. Accounts were balanced with greater efficiency. Disputes were settled quietly, without escalation. Eliza did not issue commands. She listened, weighed, and resolved. It unsettled him more than disorder ever had. One afternoon, as rain traced deliberate lines down the windows, he summoned her to the library. The room was a sanctuary of leather-bound volumes and ancestral silence, rarely open to anyone beyond himself. He gestured toward a chair but remained standing. "The eastern wing has long been neglected," he said, his tone neutral. "You may oversee its restoration. The accounts will be placed at your disposal." It was not a kindness, merely an assignment, yet Eliza recognized the significance. Authority, however limited, was being entrusted to her. "I shall see to it carefully," she replied, inclining her head. There was gratitude in her voice, but no triumph. When she left the room, the Duke remained still, uncertain why the exchange lingered with him longer than it should have. Word of the arrangement traveled quickly, reshaped by speculation. Some praised the Duke's pragmatism. Others whispered that Eliza's influence was already growing, that ambition hid beneath her calm exterior. The rivalries of court required little encouragement, and soon her smallest actions were interpreted as maneuvering. When she arranged a modest charity visit to a neighboring parish, it was praised by some as compassion, condemned by others as performance. At a gathering hosted by Lady Haversham, the tension surfaced more sharply. Eliza arrived punctually, her attire simple yet impeccable, her manner attentive without submission. Conversation flowed politely until a pause opened like a wound. Lady Haversham smiled thinly. "One must admire adaptability," she remarked. "Not every woman could ascend so suddenly and appear so composed." The implication hovered, undeniable. Eliza met her gaze. "Change teaches one restraint," she answered quietly. "It is rarely gentle." A murmur followed, curiosity tinged with discomfort. The Duke, standing across the room, witnessed the exchange. For the first time, he saw not endurance alone, but resolve. That evening, a letter circulated among select circles, unsigned yet deliberate. It questioned Eliza's upbringing, her connections, the nature of her suitability. No accusation was explicit, yet doubt was sown with practiced elegance. By morning, the tone of conversation had shifted. Smiles cooled. Invitations hesitated. Eliza received the change with composed awareness. She did not confront, deny, or appeal. Instead, she continued, performing her duties with unwavering consistency. Yet privately, the weight pressed heavier. She understood how reputations were dismantled, not by force, but by repetition. The Duke, alerted to the whispers, felt irritation sharpen into something more unsettling. The attack was indirect, but its target unmistakable. When next they dined together, silence stretched between them. At last, he spoke. "You are aware of what is being said." It was not a question. "Yes," Eliza replied. "It was inevitable." He studied her. "Do you wish me to intervene?" She paused. "Only if truth requires it." Her restraint unsettled him more than accusation might have. That night, as the house settled into quiet, an invitation arrived bearing royal seal. A formal court gathering. Attendance expected. Eliza held the card, understanding the danger it promised. The stage was being prepared, and this time, silence might not suffice. The night before the court gathering settled heavily upon Ashcombe House, the kind of quiet that carried intention rather than rest. Rain brushed the windows in deliberate strokes, muting the world beyond and drawing all attention inward. Eliza sat near the fire in the smaller withdrawing room, the one least frequented by guests, its warmth steady and unassuming. She held the royal invitation upon her lap, its seal already broken, its meaning fully understood. This was no mere summons. It was a reckoning disguised as ceremony. The Duke entered without announcement, his presence felt before it was seen. He removed his gloves with habitual precision and regarded her from across the room, his expression grave, the lines of command softened by fatigue. "You have received the notice," he said, more statement than inquiry. "Yes," Eliza replied, rising as propriety demanded, though he gestured for her to remain seated. She obeyed, smoothing her skirts with calm deliberation. The firelight caught the curve of her cheek, revealing neither fear nor expectation, only readiness. For a moment, neither spoke. The house seemed to listen, the ticking of a distant clock measuring the space between them. At last, he broke the silence. "Tomorrow will be unkind," he said. "They will press where they believe you weakest." "I am aware," she answered. "They have been practicing." He moved closer, stopping just beyond familiarity. "If there is anything you wish me to know," he said carefully, "now would be the moment." Eliza considered him, truly, perhaps for the first time. She saw not only the Duke, but the man bound by duty's relentless architecture. She folded her hands. "I wish you to know," she said, "that I never expected your protection. This marriage was entered with clarity. I have no illusions left to lose." Something shifted in his gaze. "That is not an answer. It is the only honest one I possess." She drew a measured breath. "I was raised to endure what cannot be altered. If my presence now complicates your standing, I will accept whatever distance is required. Silence, absence, obedience. I have practiced all three." He stiffened. "You speak as though you were expendable." "I was chosen because I was," she replied without bitterness. Unobtrusive, compliant, unlikely to interfere. I understood the terms. The fire cracked softly, the sound sharp in the quiet. He turned away, pacing once, then stopping with his back to her. "You bear an accusation not of your making," he said, "and you do so without defense." "Defense invites spectacle," she said. "Spectacle feeds them." He faced her again. "And what feeds you?" The question caught her unguarded, though her expression did not betray it. "Purpose," she answered after a pause. "To conduct myself in a manner that does not shame the position I occupy." "You have been shamed regardless," he said, his voice lower. She met his gaze. "Then allow it to be for reasons beyond my control." Silence fell again, heavier now, weighted with truths long unspoken. He studied her as though seeing her anew, not as a solution imposed, but as a presence chosen in spite of constraint. "I have built my life upon alliances," he said slowly. "I believed sentiment a liability." "And do you still?" she asked. He did not answer at once. When he did, it was with restraint. "I believe silence can become complicity." Her breath stilled. "Then tomorrow will ask more of you than of me." He inclined his head. "Perhaps." They stood then, the distance between them unchanged yet altered in nature. Outside, the rain eased, leaving the windows streaked and reflective. Eliza gathered the invitation, rising with composed grace. "Whatever occurs," she said, "I thank you for this candor." He watched her closely. "You should not have needed it." As she moved toward the door, he spoke again, his voice precise, irrevocable. "You will not stand alone tomorrow." She paused, turning slightly. "Is that a promise or a courtesy?" He met her gaze without wavering. "It is a statement." She inclined her head, acceptance mingled with something fragile and unfamiliar. When she left the room, the Duke remained, staring into the fire as though its answers might yet change. Beyond the walls, the court waited, sharpened and expectant, unaware that the balance it relied upon had already begun to shift. The court assembled beneath vaulted ceilings washed in winter light, where polished marble reflected faces trained to conceal intent. Eliza entered beside the Duke, her pace measured, her expression serene, though attention pressed upon her like unseen hands. Silk rustled, whispers threaded the air, and every bow carried assessment. She felt the room narrow, felt judgment arrange itself with patient cruelty. The Duke's presence steadied the space around them, his bearing precise, his silence deliberate. Together they advanced, not united by affection, yet bound by consequence awaiting its moment. Today would decide whether dignity survived rumor, or was extinguished forever. Seated before the assembled peers, accusations emerged dressed as concern, phrased politely enough to wound without scandal. A gentleman questioned lineage, a lady wondered aloud about preparation, each remark landing with rehearsed innocence. Eliza listened, spine straight, gaze lowered only in respect, not surrender. She offered no rebuttal, trusting restraint to speak louder than defense. The murmurs grew bolder, sensing vulnerability. At last, the Duke rose. Chairs stilled, breaths caught. He spoke not swiftly, but with authority honed by years of command. His voice cut through conjecture, precise, unwavering, impossible to dismiss. In that instant, the court understood power differently. He named facts, dates, duties fulfilled, charities overseen, conduct observed beyond reproach. He dismantled implication without raising his voice, exposing how malice masqueraded as etiquette. Then he did what no one expected. He claimed her. Not as convenience, nor obligation, but as his chosen equal within law and conscience. Gasps rippled. Eliza lifted her eyes, meeting his profile, astonishment flickering beneath composure. He concluded by binding his reputation to hers, declaring any slight against her an affront to him. Protocol shattered, yet order held, reshaped by courage rather than fear. Silence followed, heavy, irreversible, sealing the moment. For everyone present. The court recoiled, then recalibrated, allegiance shifting with astonishing speed. Whispers ceased, replaced by bows edged with respect. The accusers retreated into anonymity, their questions unanswered because they no longer mattered. Eliza felt the weight lift, replaced by something steadier than relief. She remained composed, though gratitude warmed her chest. The Duke resumed his seat, face unreadable, but the distance between them had altered irrevocably. In defending her publicly, he had crossed a boundary that ambition alone could never retrace. Power had found a moral spine, and the room recognized it. History quietly adjusted its course that afternoon. For Ashcombe. Later, within the carriage's enclosed quiet, lantern light swayed across polished wood and drawn curtains. Neither spoke at first. London passed unseen, reduced to motion and shadow. Eliza broke the silence, her voice soft yet certain. She thanked him, not for rescue, but for truth. He replied with equal restraint, acknowledging her fortitude, admitting his misjudgment. No vows were renewed, no promises exchanged. Yet something irrevocable settled between them, a partnership chosen under scrutiny. Outside, rain returned, gentle now, as if blessing a future cautiously earned. Ahead lay consequences, devotion, and a marriage no longer hollow. Time would test it. News traveled before dawn, carried by servants, coaches, and sharpened recollection. By morning, the defense had become legend, repeated with reverence and caution. Eliza awoke to altered courtesy, doors opened sooner, voices softened. She accepted the change without indulgence, understanding its fragility. The Duke departed early, duties unchanged, yet his household moved differently around her. Power, once distant, now acknowledged her presence. She prepared for the day ahead, aware that victory invited scrutiny anew, and that earned respect demanded constant stewardship. Such knowledge steadied her more than praise ever could. It would shape every choice thereafter. For both of them. That evening, they dined privately, a rarity no announcement accompanied. Conversation flowed cautiously, then freely, touching upon governance, history, and the burdens of expectation. Eliza's insight surprised him again, her opinions measured, informed, unassuming. He listened without correction. The absence of spectators altered everything. When silence returned, it was companionable rather than strained. They spoke of the future obliquely, as one does when hope is fragile. Nothing was promised, yet intent settled quietly, like ink drying upon parchment. Both understood permanence begins with attention, sustained daily. Outside, London breathed, unaware of the shift. History rarely announces its turns. This mattered. In the days following, letters arrived bearing careful congratulations, alliances reaffirmed with softened tone. The Duke navigated them with renewed discernment, declining those rooted in cruelty, accepting those grounded in respect. Eliza assisted quietly, her counsel sought more often, her judgment trusted. Their partnership deepened through shared labor rather than display. Together they learned restraint could coexist with resolve. Each decision reinforced the court's memory of that afternoon, when power chose principle. The lesson lingered, shaping behavior, moderating ambition, and granting the Duchess space to breathe. Such victories rarely arrive without vigilance afterward. They prepared accordingly, eyes open. Together always. Yet uncertainty remained, for society forgets slowly and forgives conditionally. Eliza understood this truth intimately, guarding her conduct without shrinking herself. The Duke, observing her strength, recalibrated his own definitions of success. Where once influence sufficed, integrity now demanded precedence. Their bond matured through mutual regard, not illusion. Each challenge met jointly fortified trust. The marriage, once declared meaningless, acquired texture and consequence. It became an instrument not merely of policy, but of shared purpose, capable of weathering scrutiny through unity carefully maintained. Such evolution is quiet, visible only to the attentive. They learned to be attentive, daily and deliberately. Looking ahead, neither pretended certainty replaced effort. Love, if it came, would arrive through consistency rather than spectacle. The court watched, recalibrated, and waited for falter. Eliza met each day prepared, dignity intact, ambition refined. The Duke stood beside her, not in declaration now, but in habit. Their story did not conclude with applause, but commenced with responsibility. Beyond the palace walls, seasons turned, challenges gathered, and a marriage forged under scrutiny prepared to prove itself again. The future would ask courage anew, and they would answer. Together, before witnesses, and within themselves. Thus the reckoning truly began. For Ashcombe.